Hello, and welcome back to Tutorial Grounds. Today I will be recapping a 2012 romance movie called Compliance. Sandra, a manager at one of the Chickwich chain's quick-service restaurants, gets a prank call from a man posing as Officer Daniels. He asserts that he spoke with the regional manager and that the police were notified of a report that a restaurant employee had stolen money from a patron's purse that day. Daniels states that Sandra would have to detain the staff member and interview them about the theft because he is too busy searching the suspected burglar's residence. Sandra accepts Daniels' offer of assistance and calls Becky, who matches the caller's description of the culprit. When Sandra and Daniels lead Becky into an office at the back of the restaurant, she refuses to admit to any theft but follows with their instructions. Sandra is instructed to examine Becky's pockets and purse for the stolen money after the caller asks several questions. Daniels then commands Sandra to perform a strip search after failing to locate the money, stating that failing to do so will result in Becky being imprisoned while a more extensive inquiry at her home is being conducted. While Becky is by herself, the caller makes the implication that if Becky doesn't peacefully submit to the strip search, her brother might also be charged separately. Becky, who has just took off her clothes, is just wearing an apron. Sandra is instructed by Daniels to place the garments in a bag and transport it to her vehicle for later police inspection. As Sandra is confused by his directive, he explains that the bigger inquiry involves marijuana possession and that the clothing may have faint traces of it that would help the case. At first, he says that sometimes clothing can have invisible pockets. During the hectic workday, Sandra must resume operating the restaurant, and the caller tells Sandra to put Becky under the supervision of a male employee for security purposes, Sandra explains to Daniels. Sandra asks Kevin to help, but he objects to the caller's requests to look over Becky and declines to take part. In the end, Sandra asks her fiancé Van to keep an eye on Becky. On the guise that Becky may be carrying contraband, Daniels forces Becky to take off the apron and do jumping jacks for Van while nude. Becky makes an effort to beg Sandra to listen to her about the experience when she briefly enters the room. The caller demands that Becky have oral sex on Van and give him a spanking as retaliation for her disobedient request. Daniels requests another male to take Van's place after he departs feeling guilty. Harold, the caretaker, is called in and is horrified by the instructions given. Sandra calls the regional manager after Harold informs her of the caller's goals, at which point she understands that Daniels' call is a prank. When the police finally show up, they accompany Becky outside while looking for possible evidence. After reports of similar events from the same individual, who is later identified as a telemarketer and a family man, a detective from another location ultimately makes the arrest at the caller's office. Becky wants to sue Sandra civilly, but her attorney proposes that she sue Chickwich, the company at large. After the incident, Sandra, who is currently unemployed, quits her engagement to Van. She is subsequently interviewed by a journalist about the incident, but she does not fully respond because her lawyer is present. The movie ends here. Click on the subscribe button so that you won't miss our next recap.